This particular stump has what is called a box cut. Even around the turn of the century and before, when they didn't have any tins or nails or whatnot, they came up with an idea that they could take a box axe and cut into the side of the tree. And this cavity would hold roughly 1.5 quarts of gum. They would whittle out a wooden spoon, or I saw one that's been bought that was used to dip that with. This is laying on its side, but it needs to be inverted and put in the ground. But this is a pretty typical cavity, one of the best that I've got. I've got a few. But this is what they used, like I say, around the turn of the century and before, maybe in the late 1800s. And it was just a prominent way of life. They take that big axe and make about 30 to 35 cuts into the green part of the tree at the root, and waller out a big hole and start chipping the tree up above it. And the gum would run down in that cavity, that base of that cavity, and stay there till you come along and dipped it. But it was a very interesting way of life. But this is a fast receding art. It's something that you don't see anywhere. Usually the naval forestry units has one. Occasionally you'll find them, but they're very few and far between. But it's just a way of life that I've always admired. Anybody that would go to that kind of trouble trying to get a little bit of tar, we call it a pine turpentine, out of a tree. My name is Gillis Carter, Willacoochee, Georgia. Okay. When I was very small, one of the first things that I might have done, and I recall, I'd get on the dip wagon and ride with the dipper around in the woods. Maybe Daddy was coming through the woods on a little old truck, and I'd ride with him, and we'd go through the little 3-path roads around, and Daddy would check. We didn't have a woods rider. Back then, as a person that gets on a mule or horse and rides the woods, so call it, and he would check behind the employees to be sure that they were getting every tree. But Daddy would drive the roads periodically and be sure that the work was done, you know, like it should be. But I started at an early age using a small bucket, dipping. And I'd done more dipping, me and my older brother Jesse, than any other thing on the gum production, except as I got older, I did a lot of the heavy pushing and loading and hauling off to the still. In the fall of the year, we'd done a lot of tree burning. We'd go in and we'd plow fire lines and work and burn a section of land, and then that's when we would start cutting trails and pushing down, cupping the timber and starting chipping in early spring or about that time, and get the gum flowing. But it's been an interesting career, something I'm very much interested in and take pride in knowing a little something about it. My name's Gillis Carter. I was raised on this farm since 1946. We moved here north of Willacoochee, and my daddy, prior to that, had been in the turpentine business since the early 20s. And he and mother made their livelihood turpentining, and Daddy didn't like to farm much, so we usually had around 60,000 or 6 crops up most of the time during the course of years there that I was even involved, from the early 50s right on through 1978, when we stopped production of gum. I've been doing this type work since I was a boy back in the late 40s and early 50s. Was an active participant in it for a number of years. We quit the gum production back in 1978, my brothers and my father and me. But it's always been a very interesting thing to me, and I'm afraid as time goes on, we might lose this frame of history. And I put these few faces up the side of the road here merely as an educational point of view. I wanted people passing the road to see what was going on, and if they wanted to stop and look, that was fine. But I particularly wanted my grandchildren to know that this was part of our heritage and has been for 200 years for people in the state of Georgia and up the coastline. It's been a good life for us. You're out in the open, plenty of fresh air, and a lot of good people that'll help you work. And we've worked many people in this area, and most of them have been excellent employees.